An employer survey reports that two-thirds of manufacturers say it is difficult to find qualified job applicants. A study of fast-growing companies says that finding qualified candidates is the company's biggest impediment to growth. By some calculations, these millions of unfilled jobs are costing the economy billions of dollars in lost business. Yet for every story about an employer who can't find qualified applicants, there's a counterbalancing tale about an employer with ridiculous hiring requirements. One of my favorites is a job ad for a cotton candy machine operator. If you've never seen cotton candy made, it is not rocket science, where the requirement for applicants was demonstrating prior success operating similar cotton candy machines. To test whether his company's hiring standards were too high, a Philadelphia area human resources executive applied anonymously for a job in his own company. "I didn't make it through the screening process," he notes. What's going on? Why can't we make this marriage work? Well, one impediment is the simple math of the situation. Here's how it works. Productivity is typically measured by how much output we get per worker. It always grows coming out of a recession because employers lay off people in the downturn and delay hiring in the upturn, giving those who remain on the job more work to do as business picks up. Productivity growth was non-existent in the first years of the recession, not surprisingly, as employers were cutting capacity, but rose a healthy 3.5% in 2011, in part because business was picking up a bit and employers were getting more work done with fewer people. In all, U.S. productivity was 6.7% higher at the beginning of 2012 than it was in 2008, when the Great Recession was in full swing. The way to think about this is that a typical employer can now do almost 7% more business without hiring anyone new. Some of that productivity is due simply to working people harder, and it will be difficult to sustain in the long run, which is why productivity growth tends to slow as the economy grows. But some of it is real and will persist. To the extent that there is any new normal in terms of the need for labor, post-recession productivity is what is behind that need. 7% productivity growth would be an overall good thing, except that the companies don't have 7% more business. The U.S. economy, as measured by gross domestic product, GDP, was only 1.2% bigger at the beginning of 2012 than it was in 2008, but with productivity 6.7% higher, employers need 5.5% fewer workers now than they did in 2008. What makes that gap worse is that the population and the workforce keep growing. All that talk in the late 1990s and 2000s about a growing shortfall in the labor force was a myth. The U.S. population grows by about 140,000 new people each month and is about 4% bigger now than it was at the end of 2008. In normal times, the labor force would grow at about that same rate. Putting these facts together yields the following. Employers need roughly 5% fewer workers now than at the beginning of the recession, yet there are roughly 4% more people who could want jobs. Since the unemployment rate was already about 5% when the financial meltdown that led to the recession began, the current unemployment rate should be that baseline 5% plus 6.7% from productivity gains, plus another 4% for population growth, minus 1.2 for the growth in GDP over the 4 years in question, the only good news in the calculation, for a grand total of 14.5%. Why isn't unemployment that high? Because many people who want jobs have stopped looking and therefore don't count as unemployed. That's also why the unemployment rate, which measures the percentage of jobless actively looking for work, will remain stubbornly high, even as the job picture improves. Some of those who gave up looking will come back into the workforce as new jobs become available, keeping the number of people looking for work high, even as more people find jobs. The more interesting question is what happens where there are jobs to be filled. There are always job openings, even when demand in the economy is falling, because some